All right, I have 6:32. Shall we call this meeting to order? All right, let's start with the invocation and the pledge. Dear God in heaven, we ask your guidance upon all of us here tonight. You have given us the responsibility to plan out a budget for next year. We give you thanks for all you've provided for us this year and over our city. Lord, we seek to be good stewards of all the money that comes in. We ask that you help us see clearly where and how we can manage expenses and projects so that the finances we do have can be stretched to the fullest. We want to continue our purpose and mission strongly in this next year, so we pray that you help us create a solid budget. We can then move forward knowing we have the resources to execute our community plans. I offer continued prayers over our council member Kelly and her family. I pray that our first responders and military at home and abroad feel your presence in abundance. We ask all of these things in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, sorry about that, y'all. Item 3 on the agenda is public comments. If anybody has comments today, they're welcome now. We'll take notes and take that into account as the council deliberates and works through the budget. It's just what was posted. I just printed a copy so I can stay on track. This is the only item. Then we'll ask the audience to, if you have additional questions or comments during, just hold them, write them down, make a note. You can tell us after the meeting, but we won't be having comment during items since it's not an actionable agenda. Okay? So I don't know if we did sign up and sign up to speak.
Yeah, I didn't do anything.
All right, moving right on. So item 6, the only item, is budget workshop. So this is not a budget meeting where we're going to take votes or action, but what we are going to do is talk about all the terms, all the definitions, how we get to the budget. Start out with the ABCs. We can go faster or slower, kind of depending on what everybody already knows or what the questions are. And then we'll take a list of all the actions and the items we want to collect for the next workshop so that we get into the line item project specific items. So before we get through today, we'll make a list of things that you guys have in mind for projects, priorities, things to be sure to include for next year, for this next budget. And don't be shy to ask something during our workshop because this is interactive. Okay? I'm not just trying to give you an information dump, although there's a lot that we're going to go over. So section 1 in your book is schedule. Hot off, so I've included the same list of meetings coming up that you got in your new council member packet. We didn't make changes to that yet, but we will. So some of those meetings that are already listed will change their name, or we'll change the intention, or we'll add to. The next couple pages are hot off the press today about deadlines of when of the tax rate requirements. So we have to follow some guidelines that come from the state and the county about when things are reported, when it's turned over officially to Erica, when it goes to the county, when the vote has to happen. So these are for your information. You can take this and read it. You don't have to memorize it right now. Just letting you know that before our next workshop, we'll take these two things and put them together so that the calendar through September will reflect all the things that will have to happen for budget.
But we can't take these up.
You can take this with you, make notes in it, write it down. It still will be subject to open records, but it's a working item for us to use while we're working on the budget. Anybody with questions about calendar or, we're starting on time. We should have plenty of time to be done before the end of September deadlines. we'll keep everybody posted on that, but if there's a question or comment about that. Okay, good. The next section is about government funds and how they work, how they're different than like personal budgeting versus municipal budgeting. So the chart that has kind of the flow, I'm gonna let Jennifer really do the explanations about a lot of these things since she's our expert
So
in
basically,
municipal accounting, but go ahead.
yeah, so basically there are 4 buckets. You can see from the graph, there are 4 buckets that you can use here. Those are the 4 main sources of income for cities: property tax, user fees, and other revenue, bond proceeds, and sales tax. We currently are one of the very few cities in this entire state of Texas that does not have any debt obligations, so we don't carry any bonds. So we do fall under property tax, user fees, and sales tax. I will say, when I came here, the city was not set up on fund accounting, which is not kosher with the government, Texas government code. So we actually went to a complete fund accounting system. And fund accounting does reflect your different income sources in these specific buckets. So if you take property tax can be used to service any debt that you have. Again, we don't have that, but it's on here. And then that debt service goes to repay your bonds. That money can also be used to go into your general fund, which is your general operating expenses. User fees goes to your general fund as well. General fund is also serviced by your sales tax. Sales tax is also split on a 50-50-50-50. It's basically split into fourths at a particular formula level to be dispersed between your EDC funds. So that's why you'll see City of Simonton Economic Development Corporation, which is 4A, and then your Simonton Economic Development Corporation, which is 4B. And then those filter down. Does anybody have any questions on those? I mean, it's a pretty self-explanatory funding scale.
I know that we talked about this earlier and made a name change. Will you tell folks what improvements is? If you were to spend money on improvements, what would that be?
Yeah, so basically the one caveat with capital projects is that those are one-time expenses. So a capital project is not, it's a building addition where you might be on progress payments, but it's encompassed into one project code, one project item. And your bond proceeds can go to your capital projects, which can then be dispersed out into, a lot of cities will call it refurbishment. That's streets, sewer systems, utility services, things of that nature.
So what's the difference between is there any difference, like capital projects, one-time expense, would that fall under improvements?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's a one-time expense. So if you're building a new wastewater treatment plant, you're not going to build a wastewater treatment plant that costs $10 million out of a general fund. You're going to build a wastewater treatment plant out of a capital projects account, and that wastewater treatment plant is going to be considered an improvement to your city infrastructure.
That'd be like putting a new roof on our building? Then?
No.
No, that's different.
I mean, a new roof is under $50,000. You don't have to go out to public bid for that.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay.
But if we use that example, it would fall under improvements.
I mean, sure, it's an improvement. I mean, I don't think anybody's arguing it's an improvement.
The point we've talked about before is
Right.
the terms, even though it's not always interchangeable with what everybody, what you would think of it
At home.
for your at-home use. So you could, there's capital replacement versus improvements versus capital projects. So it's okay to.
And I mean, one thing that we did several years ago to start that we discussed, and it is, most cities do have, is what they call a capital outlay fund. A capital outlay fund is where essentially you pay yourself a designated percentage of a particular fund every year to build up to capital projects. So a lot of cities have equipment replacement funds. So technology is on about a 2 to 3 year cycle before it has to be updated and or replaced. So cities set up an equipment replacement fund where you pay yourself every month, every budget cycle, whatever that may be, so that in 2 to 3 years into this life cycle of technology, you're not having to outright expense out of the general fund and operational. You already have a fund set up to fund your equipment replacement. You know, a lot of police departments do it with police cars, you know, body cams. Parks and Recreation departments do it with equipment. It's all kinds of technology. So it's basically, I mean, if I'm gonna simplify it to understanding your personal finance, it's basically like setting up independent savings accounts. Or you wanna buy a new car, you set up a savings account. You wanna buy a new house, you set up a savings account. You want to go on a trip, you set up a savings account. Cities are no different. It's just we have strict regulations on how those funds can be funded.
One of the other differences is that between municipal budgeting and personal budgeting is just how the money comes in and what, for example, the city gets paid weekly for sales tax. And you never know how much that is. So it could be $3,000 one week, it could be $600 the next week. So it ebbs and flows. It's also kind of a misconception sometimes that the new budget year, you're funded all of your money that's going to come in that year. It doesn't work like that. So you're carrying over money to continue to pay the electric bill, or I'm making kind of a broad example, but that money comes in big chunks when property taxes go into the county and then they pay us, but smaller chunks later in other parts of the year. That sort of thing. All right, after that chart, there is some definitions, kind of what we're talking about some of the funds. Jennifer, you got any comments about the 3 funds that make it short and sweet?
No, these are the 3 main ones. I mean, you'll see in other cities they have utility funds, they have enterprise funds. We don't have those because we don't utilize water, sewage, garbage, things like that. So we don't sell those utilities, so we don't have an enterprise fund, a police fund, any of that stuff. So these are the 3 main ones that we focus on, being the general fund, which is our 100 operating fund, and then our special revenue and capital projects.
So this, I think this is 12 pages or something like that. 12 or 13. This is called our chart of accounts. And I want y'all to be able to see all the different categories and accounts that are in the system that we're using. This matches when we're budgeting line items, but some of these things you might not have ever heard of, like what a CDARS is, CDARS.
Those are our investment accounts.
Yeah, those are investment accounts, but I thought we might go page by page. It doesn't have to be every single line, but if there's something on here that you don't already know what it is, I'd be happy to answer that now.
And some of these are not, we don't activate them. They're on the accounting CPA side. They are for accounting purposes. So some of them you'll see like
The ICS suite?
Correct, like ICS suite. So that's there for accounting purposes. We have an ICS suite set up to where our operation account stays at $25,000 every single day. If we get a $50 deposit into our account and it goes to $25,025, at midnight every night it sweeps that $25 into a very lucrative ICS kind of investment account. It's got a high yield on it. And so that is in there to show the debits and the credits between those daily sweeps at midnight every single day. So if we go in and we process payroll, and payroll hits our bank account at noon, at midnight it's going to go back and it's going to replenish that $25,000 up to the $25,000 with what was processed out through payroll, just so that it always stays at $25,000.
So most of those items that we're talking about on that first page are listed as assets. That's where the money is. Liabilities starts there and continues. Payroll liabilities, payroll taxes, TMRS.
And a lot of these, I will say, on the liabilities are empty. These are just placeholders that when the software was built, they put in, like due to on that last page, accounts payable not consolidated, that's an empty hole. Credit card, that's an empty hole. Comptroller for overpay, deferred revenue, deferred franchise fees, free to use, and fund balance, those are all empty holes. That's just the way that the software sets it up. So we don't, they're there if you need them.
It's there for future use if
We don't
develop that category if you need it. You see the sales tax, the 1/4% for roads. ABCs separately. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's just going to, it's just quotes and goes to that for the revenue.
Right.
And the revenue.
Right.
Do y'all have a question?
I just wanted to identify who people were. I missed that part, so.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to hear.
Are we allowed to ask questions? I thought she said not to. Okay.
No, that's why I was asking, because it was confusing to hear what they were saying, because there was a lot of talking going on.
Okay. Can we ask questions after the meeting?
You can ask Lori, but a workshop meeting doesn't typically allow conversation.
So the EDC fees, that's on 3, y'all might already pass it, the EDC technology fund, insurance fees. I mean, you might be able to see easily what belongs to what, but we also have a ton of acronyms, so don't be afraid to.
This is a child
Let me know.
safety fee from the county. What is that?
Child safety fee, that is, you got a better way to explain it?
It's just a
The
special
county-
account set up from the county. They send us $1,100 a year for child safety, but it's a restricted account. It has to be used in a specific way. You can't just, you can't go buy pencils with it. It has to be used in within a specific restriction.
Some of the things that we've done have been events where they came out and we did how to install car seats, and there were giveaways specific to families with children, things like that. Yep.
We did emergency management, and we did some stuff with that too, like the
The
backpacks
outreach,
with the
yeah.
raincoats and stuff.
You'll see transfers under expense, transfers between, two EDCs, 4A and 4B. Same thing, so money comes in, it needs to be in its correct category. So this sort of line items let us move the money exactly where it needs to go. Same thing with that child safety you were just talking about, Courtney.
Okay, what's TMRS mean?
Texas Municipal Retirement System, that's our retirement.
As you get into those, like I think page 4 is when it starts, maybe 3, you can see the department name starts to get populated and the category column. So it just gives you more definition about what line item it belongs to. And the reason I'm pointing that out is so when we get ready to go into budgeting line by line or category by category, it's easy to see then, okay, facilities has all of these things in it, not just repairing carpet. See what I mean? So there's lots of ways to designate exactly, is it office supplies, is it a utility thing, is it a maintenance and repair type of deal. Then when you get to page 7, you'll see, so this first section was general fund, then there's a section for each of the EDC 4A, 4B. There's one for grants that we'll get to. Might be the last one.
No, there's
Keep Simonton Beautiful has its own, and then consolidated cash. So that it's a visible way to see how the money is separated. There are different accounts for different things, but also accounting in order to keep very minute detail about everything going on in each one of those. The categories were pretty much the same between the 4A and the 4B. Some of the things that you would see different are, like 4B has business assistance grants. There's more detail about this once you see, like we'll start looking at the budget that we're in right now, and you can see how much is in each line. But just want to make sure you know, have an idea of how this is accounted, because everything that we have, every dollar is in a bucket somewhere. And it's very meticulously planned out, so it's not just, oh, like the Texas lottery money was supposed to be for schools and ended up in the general fund. You never know where that money goes. This is not that. I think I'm showing my age for how many years ago that was. Not everybody is to grants yet, Jennifer, but do you want to start giving a little bit of how grant money works? We can receive the money. It has to be very specifically segregated, and then how it's spent and that sort of thing.
So that's why we have our own fund for grants, is because sometimes, depending on the pay cycle of the grant, sometimes they pay on progress pay, sometimes they pay lump sum at the beginning, sometimes they don't pay until you're at the end and you have your receipts, and it's more of a reimbursement. So what we did was, we have some grants that we're in course of and we're sitting there. So we have invested them in a fund with a high yield ICS account, so that if we're not using that money, it can accrue interest that we can roll back into that. It's automatically rolled back into our fund. But every grant is really different on the restrictions, but most grants that we work with are very restricted funding, meaning they are approved based on a scope of work prior to the money being facilitated to the entity. So, for instance, one of the ones that we did was $700,000, and it was for drainage. They just didn't give us $700,000 and say, do a drainage project. We had to go out and measure linear feet. It had to be approved by FEMA. FEMA had to send it to the state. State had to send it to General Land Office. General Land Office had to send it to the county. The county had to send it to us. The work was put out to bid. It was performed, and then progress payments were sent to us, deposited into our grant fund, and then it was basically reimbursed back out. So again, every one is different. We currently have some money sitting in one of our grant accounts that we were allotted about a year and a half ago, and the federal government still has not been able to fine-tune the restrictive projecting of what we can use that money for. So until we have a consultant who is working with us on that. Until we have some clear scope of that, then we're not, that's responsible for us. We're not going to use that money until we get the clear scope of work from the Texas General Land Office, and it matches what our projected project is. So for now, it's just sitting kind of in this fund account, accruing interest. But again, every grant is different.
Yeah. I guess I'm also trying to make sure that.
And I will tell you, one of the problems, I think where Lori is kind of going with this, is the reason that we created this additional fund to basically pigeonhole our grant money into. When I came, one of the first things I had to do was deal with a grant that we had been paid for 2 years previous. The money had been spent, but it had not been spent on the project that it was designated for, and we received the bill for it and had to spend the money, which we had to pull out of a reserve to pay for, because the grant money had been spent 2 years previously. So to circumvent those problems from happening, that is not good accounting, is to create your funds and put that money in there and hold it until, your project billing comes up and you can pay for it.
It can't ever accidentally get spent on paying the electric bill or a road project or something.
And it should never sit in your operating fund, ever.
I had a question about the Simonton vehicle. It says there's a chart of account number for it, it's 500.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also same thing as in the general fund.
It is, we're in the process of moving it out of the general fund. It is sat in the general fund because the city does designate money. I mean, it's a city entity, so we budget money into that account. What we have realized over the past year and a half is that Keep Simonton Beautiful now generates its own portion of revenue through activities and events that it does. So we go out and we garner sponsorships for a lot of our events. It was not clean to run those revenues through an operating miscellaneous revenue. So we created a 500 fund for Keep Simonton Beautiful so that we can have a credit debit system within that fund for Keep Simonton Beautiful.
So you're not using the general fund anymore since you've set up a new one?
We just set it up. We will be, I mean, we use some of it, but it's being, I mean, it's not like one day you use it, the next day you don't. Like, there's a phasing out process, and Julie's been working on that the past, 20 days.
Is that the only thing that generates its own revenue that you have separated down? I'm just trying to absorb some of this.
Well, the EDCs
Dan.
are, the EDCs, I don't know if this is the answer, the question you're asking, but the EDCs are funded specifically by state law.
Mm-hmm.
So when that money comes through the state, it's already designated specifically for that. But they don't create new revenue by doing events or something, so maybe that's not exactly what you're.
I just wonder if there was anything else besides Keep Simonton Beautiful that generated its own revenue.
Not that I
So
know.
the EDC is funded by a portion of the sales tax. So that's kind of how they do it, and this is just the
So they
line
don't
item.
make
So it
their
shows
own.
the sales tax in this EDC, it shows the EDC revenue right there. So that's where the money's coming in, and then the other part is just all the expenses that are line items that it's kind of like coding insurance. They have to put it in this particular line.
So I think the answer is no. I think Keep Simonton Beautiful is the only one that's creating additional income through its activities.
Other than investments.
Yeah.
So is 4A and 4B still separate, or are they
Yes.
together?
They're separate.
Okay.
And then that last one, account 999, consolidated cash,
It's a CPA account.
it's a CPA. We have all the time we need, so I don't want to rush it. Anybody have questions about categories or how that gets accounted? Okay, if not, super fun. Let's move on to tax rate, tax information in that next section. So budget and tax rate are two separate things, but you have to consider them together because without one, you don't have the other one, or you gotta have one to fund the other. You gotta work on a budget with the tax rate and the dollars in mind. So that's why we're talking about them both at the same time and trying to give you as much insight as to how the income gets here so that it's clear and easy then to go through and figure out the budget items that are priority. So there are three different kinds of tax calculations. I'm going to let Jennifer speak to this because I will say a word wrong here or there and change the meaning inadvertently, but
I mean, it's
the
pretty,
no new revenue rate.
it's pretty simple. That's why we printed it out. I mean, it's not a simple concept. It's a very complicated concept, and a lot of people, it's very hard to understand. I meant like it's simple. We've tried to break it out into three categories. So the basic three types of taxing that you can take.
As a municipality.
Right. No, let me back up. A city doesn't get to arbitrarily just go in and say, we want a tax rate of blah, 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 blah. That is not how it works. So it falls into three categories. You have a no new revenue tax rate, which means that the state of Texas coordinates with the county based on our appraisals and comes up with what it will cost the city to generate the exact same amount of revenue as last year and what that tax rate will be to generate that amount of revenue. So no new revenue means you're generating no new revenue. And that
Same
number,
total dollars.
right, same total dollars as the previous year. So that tax rate is given to you. The next rate is the voter approval rate. Historically, the voter approval rate was 8.5%. In 2019, SB2 changed that law. Abbott went in and put a cap on the voter approval rate, which used to be called the effective tax rate. And that was, that cap lowered from 8% down to 3.5%. That was extremely detrimental statewide to cities, their tax rate, because the state tax each year taxes more and more responsibilities on cities and municipalities for having to cover, span of coverage with their cities, and now you've gone in and you've cut our what we can collect in half. It did not lower the homeowners' tax rates. Let me be very clear. What it did was it lowered municipalities' ability to grab taxes, and it funded the state more. The third one is a de minimis. The de minimis rate is, that was created in 2019 going into 2020 specifically for very regulated entities within the state of Texas that the 3.5% tax rate cap would be detrimental to. And it gave the opportunity for specifically rural and small cities, small tax levy cities, to go in and to basically allow their taxing system, their budget, to collect under $500,000 of tax revenue a year at no fault of having to go to a special election. Cities can choose to go above the voter approval rate, but you have to go to a public vote. It's considered a special election. And again, special elections are very expensive, but you have to go to a special election. The de minimis rate, which was targeting small tax levy cities and rural cities, allows for you not to have to go to a general election, given that you take it one time and it readjusts your tax rate to be able to collect $500,000 or less in annual revenue. So those are the three categories. There are some special provisions within the Texas tax code that we have taken advantage of in the past. There are tax credits, tax increment credits, based on emergency management. The city has taken some of those over the years with COVID. I can speak with you individually if you'd like more information on that. They get very, very detailed because there is you're actually responsible for the increment rebate payback the next year. So, anyways, there are some other ones, but they're not really applicable for us right now.
Since we're not in an emergency, you probably wouldn't apply this year, but you can have all the history about it you would like, if you're interested in that, or if you would like to know more about the emergency portions. But the small taxing entity, I'm probably using the wrong term, but is what the city of Simonton used last year. We still are considered that. We're under a population of 30,000 people. And
we collect less than 50 cents tax, and we revenue less than 500,000.
That next page, with the truth in taxation, this tells you basically the same thing, that kind of give you some visual about the terminology changes that were made with that Senate Bill 2. And that's not this legislative session that they've just been in, but 2 years ago. So you'll see in here lots of these things are dated from that time. It's not that we forgot to put the most recent. It's since this session is just now closing, the documents have not been produced yet from that. But the terminology change, like it used to be called effective tax rate, now it's called no new revenue tax rate. It can be confusing when you're reading and studying and working that up because they're changing terms on you. It was supposed to simplify. I think it does. What does a rollback rate mean to anyone? If you're not in this industry, nothing. But voter approval rate maybe is more clear. Gives you an example of how those things are calculated. And some information about what triggers an election. This council has already indicated that we would not like to go to a higher rate. We've already shared that our appraisals estimates are in, and we wouldn't recommend the higher tax rate. We clearly already can take a reduction. So some of this is redundant. We're just telling you how it works. We probably won't need any of it, but please feel free to ask questions about that if you have questions.
Sorry, not to interrupt you. You have, July the 25th is our next budget workshop. And you also have it here that that's when the tax roll, the certified appraised tax rolls, because I know you've seen the one where it says it might be this. I also know that there's a ton of folks, including myself, that is fighting those within the month of July, obviously before the 25th. So at the next budget workshop, will we have that roll tax?
I can tell you in the past 5 years, we have never gotten it on time, ever. We have never gotten the certified rolls on time. Last year, we didn't
Yes,
get,
it does.
last year we didn't get the certified rolls till almost the end of August, and whenever I get the certified rolls, we'll get there. In fact, I think it's a couple more sheets in here. It's a worksheet. It's a very lengthy worksheet that the council, that the county sends you once those rolls are certified. Last year, when we got that worksheet from the county, I literally went through it by hand with a calculator and had to send 13 versions of corrections to the county before they got it right. Because very rarely we've never gotten it on time, and we've never gotten it in the past, 4 years that it's actually been correct. So that's
So we
why.
basically have 2 budget workshops that are pointless.
Well, they're
No,
not pointless.
no, because your tax rate is built to fund your budget. So the budget that you're doing is still, this is still good work that you're doing.
No, I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying, so we have one on the 25th that we may not have that information on, because we are literally sitting at $1 below being a large taxing unit.
Right.
So at the $499,
Right, we will not go over, but we won't go over to a large taxing unit.
So we'll use our best estimate and all the data we do have to
Okay.
build the budget. And then when it comes, we'll do a meeting after that so that we'll make adjustments to make sure that if they give us something slightly higher or slightly lower.
And we do have
And the
time
next-
earmarked in early August for another budget
Well,
workshop.
yeah, it's 5 days later, but you're saying that we don't normally get that information until way later than
We've
that.
never
and
gotten it in
it's
July.
due on
That's how
the
you get,
29th.
yeah, that's how you get pressed down to the
So there's
last day having a meeting. like
there's
we
also
did
a
this.
60-day rule. So if they don't get us the certified tax rolls by the 25th, it's 60 days after that we do receive them that everything has to be wrapped up. That's state law.
Yeah. So the dates can change based on when they get their
Gotcha.
documents.
Just
Maybe
Yeah.
they will perform a miraculous effort this year, but it'll be the first time in many years when we've got it on time. So you'll see going through.
Yeah, so the very next thing is the letter from Jordan Wise at the appraisal district, the chief appraiser, saying that same thing. That appraisal review boards are going on now. They're supposed to approve the records but no later than July 20th, so that they then can turn it around to us by July 25th. We'll see if they do. Hopefully they will. They have good goals, right? That next page is that 2023's certified estimate of value. So they've given us their best estimate to date. And it's certified, so we can use that for planning purposes. And the whole reason they give that to us is exactly what we're doing here, so that we can start working on it and be
And
ready.
historically, the preliminary is not very different from the certified. Historically, it has been very, very similar. Within a couple $1,000s difference.
Do y'all have questions about that? The certified estimate? Okay. We included, on the next page, a snapshot worksheet per calculation of the tax rate. So if we use the numbers that they gave us in the certified estimate, what that best estimate looks like for the tax rate. If you didn't change anything else, we wanted to keep our budget for this at the same $499,999. You would see a change in the rate per hundred. So it gives you an idea of a no new revenue rate at 37 cents, the voter approval rate at 38 cents, where we're at 44 today. So you've already 6 or 7 cents potentially back from the current budget that we're in right now. And Jennifer tried to make sure it was clear that this was estimated. Really no jokes, no chuckles about the red estimated across the front. So that's a starting
This is your current
point.
one.
Huh?
I said, this is your current one, but the worksheet behind it is really from last year?
That's right.
Yeah.
So the next one that doesn't have estimated, that's the current budget we're in right now, and the worksheet that we used for that. And then following that is that calculation worksheet that looks like it belongs to the IRS, and it's just that complicated.
Where did the 112 million come from?
That's the 2022
Nope.
total tax.
Oh, it's the
rate.
reductions. It's the,
Gotcha,
Yeah.
okay. Because I was like, this one says 134 million.
yeah.
So, I gotcha.
So we'll do this worksheet over and over and over, the snapshot, as we do the process and once we get the rules from them. But wanted to be able to see that, we said at budget time last year in September that values were increasing, all of the data from the county said values of properties were increasing, so this year would provide ability for us to roll that tax rate per 100 back. Here it is, just let's look at it and see, was that right? Yep. And we can work from there. The tax rate calculation worksheet, unless y'all would like to walk through it, we included this for an example. We'll be doing this again here shortly. And it is complicated. The county gives lots of the detail that goes into this, and then it's up to Jennifer to prepare the rest. And you can see, this is very much like doing a tax return. We got tax ceilings and improvements and all the things. Levy calculations. Some of these things don't apply to us, like a rate adjustment for state criminal justice mandate. We don't have that.
No debt,
Yep, we don't have debt.
no debt
You
obligation.
can see that as a zero. Indigent health care right now is a zero. I think everything on page 5 is that's not true. At the bottom, we've got 2021 adjustments for sales tax, specifically for property value reduction, but we don't have a responsible portion for like county hospitals or county indigent.
And this is last year.
Yes, this is last year. The collection rates, if I recall, come from the county, Jennifer?
Yes.
That's on page 6, line 45 is what I'm referring to. So, one of the points about this is we can't just start filling this out and have it ready to go on our own. A lot of this has to come from the county. So we are at the mercy of when they're ready, when they have it correct, when it comes and we have to audit it and make sure it's right. That's where some of these back and forth, when Jennifer's found so many errors last year, has been. Page 7 has the additional sales and use tax worksheets. Adjustments for pollution control worksheets, and it's all in here. That de minimis rate worksheet from last year is on page 8. We'll have the information there this year, but you can see that the de minimis rate proposed last year was 64 cents. And the council decision was to go with line 70, the rate necessary to produce the income, but as a small taxing entity instead of the de minimis rate. That's where the calculations come from.
So, just to clarify, the voter approval rate last year would have been 0.20. And there have been people who have said, oh, well, the council could have voted to accept Jake Davis's recommendation to split the 44-cent tax rate in half and meet it 50%. No, that's incorrect. Because the voter approval rate was 20 cents. Anything that it goes over a voter approval rate has to go for a special election, unless it is a number given to you by the state of Texas as a de minimis, is either one of those de minimis rates, which was the full de minimis rate of 0.64, or the line 70, which was the rate, the minimum de minimis, which was necessary to impose $500,000 in taxes, which was the 0.44, which that's the one that we were given direction from the attorney to go with that one. So I just wanted to clarify that you can't just, there are restrictive provisions on tax rates. You can't just say, I think 0.26 sounds like a great tax rate. When your voter approval rate is 0.20, there's some obstacles that you have to overcome with that.
Y'all are awfully quiet.
Drinking from the fire hose.
Real right. All right, that next sheet after this worksheet, it's just another, like a visual example, trying to make it, give you information in more than one method, maybe. So this one explains each of the different reasons or notices about hearings and elections on tax rates. Who has to do it, why, how, water districts, school districts, that sort of thing. Notices, hearings, meetings. Erica is great about making sure that all the notices are on point. So as we move forward in our process, you'll see in that earlier calendar section that there are notices required. We have to give information to Erica by a certain date. She will post it and meet all of the deadlines for hearings and notices with the different kinds of media. You can see what those are at the bottom. Newspapers and internet is now allowed for some things. There are requirements around that. And then the next section is property tax process. This is a summary by the TML staff after the last legislative session. It kind of tells you more about Senate Bill 2. They call it the Texas Property Tax Reform and Transparency Act. And it effectively created some of these things we've been talking about. Lowering the tax rate, a taxing unit can adopt without voter approval. That's where you changed the 8% to 3.5%. Made numerous changes to the procedure that you use to adopt a rate, and making changes to the property tax appraisal process. We're not involved in that part, but the first two we are.
Aren't they getting ready to change all this stuff in this legislative session?
Probably.
So
So we'll be subject to that whenever they're summarized and go
When
into
does it
effect.
go into effect?
They're not all the same thing. Some things happen in September, some things happen the first of the year.
I mean, they've
There's
passed
something
this
that's
session.
retroactive. I would-
Yeah, they've
not
passed, I mean,
tax, but-
I'm literally watching because we're waiting to see if Abbott opens a session tomorrow.
Another special
To
session.
run through the weekend. But, there are some things that were passed this year in the session that we're waiting to get clarification on that actually went into effect in January. So they passed it and they made it retroactive for January 2023. So, just kind of depends on the issue and the urgency of it and how it will affect whatever agency it's affecting.
Right. One thing I like about this document is it gives another definition about terminology changes. It explains what it used to be, what it is now, and gives a brief explanation about what it is. That's on the first page about what terminology was changed. That's still in effect now. I don't expect that anything about those definitions are changing, but you're right, you could see other changes in the code. And this is full of other rates that we don't typically use, but it could be, the unused increment rates.
The unused
Those
increment
sort of
rate is the
things.
one that I was talking about. Like if we take an emergency rate, then we have to do the unused increment rate the next year to offset the emergency rate that was taken. So it's kind of a credit and balance type system in the way that works. But again, we don't formulate that. The state formulates it.
This will tell you all about how the de minimis rate works, the minimum and maximum rate, how they're calculated. And all of these can go back to the code. If you read something or you're looking for something, the Texas tax code, we can get more information for you or help you get any additional data for that you need. You don't have to absorb all of it right this second, but if you have questions about it, we're happy to talk about it.
On page 16, when it says the city required to post on the website under SB2.
Yeah.
Do we do all that?
Sure do.
I know we were way behind on the audits. Are we caught up on that?
We are not, she's still in process. Our new auditor is working on that.
Do we have 1 year, 2 years?
She's doing them all at the same time. Yeah, it's 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the best practice will be, once she gets us caught up, then staying at an audit every year. She's supposed to be so much better than we had with Sanderson. But he did that to us multiple times. I
And
think when
multiple other
when
cities.
Mayor McJunkin was mayor, we were 3 or 4 years behind at one point because he was a tough customer.
So on the worksheets,
So-
just out of curiosity,
Working on it.
on the snapshot worksheets that
Uh-huh.
you use, or just put the estimation on there or whatever,
Mhm.
that's what's actually on the website. What is actually published to the website from the government code should be this whole entire form.
I don't know if that form.
So one of my really
What is
good-
published on our website is what our attorney tells us to publish on our website. In fact, the snapshot that's published on it is not required to be put on our website. That's a courtesy post that we put out there. That worksheet is not required to be put on our website. It's only the small taxing unit that's required to be on our website, and that's posted. So the small taxing unit does not come until we know what our tax rate is. The small taxing unit includes the tax rate.
Okay.
So Justin actually goes through all of the documents and tells us what, well, I say us, he works with Erica on what is to be posted on the website related to that. Is there a specific place that you were told that worksheet is supposed to be posted?
The Nueces County tax assessor is a very good friend of mine, and he asked me for the snapshot when we were going through the budgeting last year. And
So the snapshot is actually, I'm not discrediting it, I find that interesting because the snapshot, I created that. That's not a standard document.
Yeah, I know, that's
So-
because I sent him that. I
Right.
could find it on the website. So I sent him that, and he was like, whoa, that is not complete, that is not accurate.
Oh, it's
There's like
100%
several more
accurate, and
pages.
it's 100%
No,
complete.
but he was looking for this actual
Right.
form 585G.
No, all that's required is
versus-
the taxing notice.
Gotcha.
And every city does a snapshot different. That's a courtesy of explanation for your residents. The county used to provide a snapshot to its cities, and the cities would take that and format it in whatever way they wanted. They were doing it, 3 years ago when Irene, if you want to give me his information, I can send him whatever he needs to see.
No, he was actually walking me through it and the way that it works and whatnot, and he was asking for this specific one, where from the comptroller, like we send this in, this is the form that's supposed to be used when it's posted online, according to him. And he's been their tax assessor
I've never
for
heard that.
27 years, I believe, as long as we've been out of high school. But he was just asking me for this, so I was very curious to see it.
Well, he's with the county.
He's the Nueces County tax assessor.
Okay, yeah, well, I'm saying like county requirements of like county budget is different than municipal requirements for the posting. of
No,
the
I'm aware.
website.
I had asked him, like, I don't know, it was a conversation, and he was like, well, just go on the website, you'll see the worksheet. So I sent him the worksheet, and he was like, no, there's like several pages missing if that's the one that they use. So that's why I was asking, yeah. And that's also the only one that was on there as well. Is that because the taxes haven't been increased, or they've kind of just wavered between a penny or two?
You mean the only year that it was
It was the
posted?
only year, yeah, that I could find.
I don't remember that off the top of my head.
Okay.
Is it the first year? Every year we're trying to add more and more things, so it could be possible.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't-
I figured it was because we went up.
And requirements change and,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and let's be honest, it was a tough budget year. The council was not excited about taking this increase. They felt like it was necessary. We were going to be 10 years trying to catch up if we didn't take action on that, and we were trying to do the comprehensive plan. So we wanted to share everything we possibly could. So if that was the first year we put the snapshot out there, it's just because we were trying to make sure that it could be as understandable and clear on the webpage as possible. So I'd have to go back and look and see, but I'm going to say that's what it is.
Okay.
All right, so the next section is the budget that we're operating under right now. I would like, if we could, to skip over that just for a few minutes. And we can come back to it, but I know it's boring to sit here and read line by line, and we're not really ready to go through and say this many dollars for this category just yet, because we've got more work that we need to do as a group, getting prepared for that. But I want you to have a copy of it so that you can refer to it when you take this home and you're working at the house. What I would really like to capture is projects, priority items, wish list items. What do you all have in mind, if anything, that you want to be sure that we include or explore including in the budget for this year?
I think we kind of need to finalize a comprehensive plan if that's where we're going before we can really make a lot of those statements, I would think. It's unfortunate that we're clearly not going to have that prior to, but
Okay, well, I'll give you a suggestion of one that I think we need to add, and we'll pencil this in after last year's, is I think we need to address roads. There are roads in Valley Lodge, and not only in Valley Lodge, but this is the example I'm gonna give you. There are roads in Valley Lodge that are not slated to a grant that we're working on, but now that we've completed the drainage program, drainage project in their area, we need to get on to spending some money and having those roads fixed. Hondo is an example of that. And if you haven't been on Hondo this year, go take a look. It's a great example. I mean, graded gravel would be better than what's going on that road right now. And the council made several years in a row the decision not to spend money on some of those roads because we were completing the drainage project and they weren't part of a grant. So I think council consider that. That's a suggestion I would make to start that conversation with. I think the residents would appreciate it. There are some places, I know this is kind of separate from budget, but maybe not. There are some places that, like on Wagon, that really need to be rebuilt, but those are waiting for the MITMOD. Is that right?
Yeah, they're
the
in the
MITMOD
queue.
grant. We're having to wait right now until they start awarding money for urgent need. That's the one where we didn't qualify for low to moderate income. So we're kind of got that on a holding pattern. So I would say Wagon needs a lot of work, but that particular one from this point to this point is already
And the reason,
designated
to Lori's
something.
point,
So-
the reason that roads like Wagon have been designated to the MITMOD grant process is because to rebuild 1 mile of Wagon is $275,000.
Does that mean tearing it all the way down?
It means milling it down, using the same milled material to rebuild it back up with the new stabilized top. So to mill it down and remove that material and bring in new material to be built up is even more than that. But we are confident in our relationship with Interlocal, with the county, that we have been able to secure that kind of, that pricing, looking at a complete rebuild, but utilizing the same material once they mill it down. Now, that's not to say they're not gonna have to add some material to it, but it's a lot more efficient to, once they mill it, to use the existing material and then have to add, a small amount to it, rather than to just scrape it and, that was the most.
How many miles of road are we looking at?
So Craig is working on, we have it. I wasn't able to get the exact number by the meeting today. Craig has it because we did it like a complete mileage. When you're doing roads, it's linear feet. He did a full audit because we had to have it for the MITMOD when we had our linear feet sections that we submitted for that grant process. So when I get that back, do you remember off the top of your head? I don't remember. I think
In the project or total?
total. I wanna say-
In the city?
Yeah.
We have 16 miles.
Yeah, I was gonna say 15, but okay, 16 is total in the city. But as far as what he felt fell into the urgent need category, that's what, I can get that to you. Because we had to have that for mid-law.
So if council thinks that's an item that you are interested in getting the details of, we would gather that and have it by the next workshop so that you can decide, this is how many miles are in the grants, this is how many miles need work, this is how many we can afford to do this year.
So even if you took half of the city's roads and assume that half of those roads would be in Valley Lodge, you're looking at over $2 million in road repair.
So this is kind of the same mentality that was utilized last year during the budgeting, and we have seen zero road construction, or at least I know there's several neighbors here tonight that live on other roads besides Hondo and Wagon and things along those lines, that their roads are just almost impassable.
Well, there were no roads.
Ranchero, Bronco, Bridle, all of those, or not Bronco, Bridle.
Buckboard.
Buckboard, I mean, it is just, and it was part of the drainage program, and it's literally cannot.
According to drainage and
Roads
roads
weren't
are
part
two
of drainage.
totally.
No, I'm saying, I know we held off because of the drainage program going on, but those roads have been like that for 4 years.
Right, well, that's why I'm bringing it up. Like, I
So,
think it
but
needs to be a
wasn't that
priority.
put into the budget in
No.
this massive tax hike? You gave us those numbers last year.
We talked about the numbers, but if you look through the budget, you'll see that major and minor road repair, there's minor money in there only for patch holing, and we talked about that. The bulk of the tax increase, which we covered on numerous occasions, was $200,000 that went specifically to the comprehensive plan and completing that in a 1-year period.
So you're right that we gave information about what roads would cost, but council did not budget the road repair to happen in that budget year because they prioritized the comprehensive plan and finishing the drainage project, so that we didn't ruin anything that we repaired. And some of, just FYI, some of the roads that have been done, like a lot of roads that have been done in the last 3 years, were part of a grant. So they were out of order. We said, we're not going to repair roads until we finish drainage. Then we were repairing roads. That was only because that they were on a timetable, very time-specific grant. You can repair this now as a result of the flooding in 16 or 17, but I think there was some for each year.
So
Just saying, I'm saying something contrary. We said we wouldn't do roads, and then we did some roads. That was because there was grant money specific to that, and it had to be done during that time frame.
Right, and I
So-
just want to clarify, that's not to say that we have not done roads. We have done, I can run in my office really quick and get that number, but it's close to $700,000 in road repair over the past 4 years. So road repair has been done. It has not been, like, we haven't neglected it. It's just that post-Harvey and drainage, there was so much work. And let me go get that so that I can be very clear on that.
Okay, so is that an item that y'all would like us to be working on for the next workshop?
Yes.
All right. Any other?
What about a code enforcement officer?
Okay. I'm sure make life easier.
In August of 2018, we did Ash and Nels Road for $89,961. We also did Barnes Road for $23,401, and we did Valley Lodge for $446,108.83.
In 18, you said?
In 18, we did Ash, Nails, and Barnes. In 19 and a little part of 20, we did Valley Lodge.
So it's been 3 years. It's time to potentially look at that again and get the cycle going.
I think, I know Wagon is a terrible road. Fort Bend is almost as bad. What I want to avoid is actually just putting another top coat on that. Because we're just building that road higher and higher.
No, and we know that, and that's why last year in that budget, we brought it up. The overlay is 125, and there are roads that can be overlaid.
Sure.
But some of our major target ones, specifically Wagon, is not. That's a complete rebuild. And we went in with that mentality that we knew that there were some of those larger portions that needed that rebuild. And that's when we started working with the county, utilizing our interlocal. Is it a mill and rebuild, or is it a mill, dispose, and then complete rebuild? And the county went out and did some assessments, and based on the height, the drainage, the elevation, everything, they felt like the mill and rebuild with the existing material was the most efficient for those specific roads. So yeah, I mean, we're very aware that there are some where we can do that, but there are others that absolutely would not even be entertained.
Road and Bridge wouldn't even overlay Wagon again.
Yeah, they
said
wouldn't overlay it.
Okay, I'm sorry, Kelly, you said code enforcement officer. We've had some difficulty finding somebody who was available to do that on a as needed or an ad hoc basis, but I don't know if we've looked in a couple of years, so I'll work on that. Anything else?
Do you have anything from the county on turning over the green spaces at this point? No.
Oh, you do? Okay, I was just gonna say.
Sweet.
Erica, what you got, ma'am?
Well, what I got was, I sent Greg Batts for the OEM that's over that today. I sent him a note asking, telling him what we were planning. He said that the county had to go back and they were appealing some of the final numbers and the NFIP data that was given. He's hoping by the end of summer it should be completed and then we can go into deeding. But he said he would keep me updated. So that's the best I got.
Or they deed it over to the city. Is that what you're saying?
Right, right. They've got it. I don't think they have completed the whole buyout with FEMA. So
got it.
yeah.
Well, because what we found out after the fact is that they can't deed those over to the city until every buyout lot in the county is complete.
Okay.
So originally they told us they would deed it to us when Simonton was done, and we pressured and pressured and pressured to where Simonton was the first city that they did. So here we were excited that these were going to be deeded over, and then now we're in year 3 and we find out, well, it's because FEMA won't release the paperwork for the deed to be done until the entire project, because it was government funded.
Right.
Until the entire project.
But that was my response from Greg Bast. But I also sent a note to the commissioner to ask him if he had heard anything about it.
And then once those get deeded over, how are they tended?
Well, the city has to maintain them.
Well, yeah, the city will have to maintain them, but we've also entertained and we've talked with Harris County about a leaseback program, so that, and we actually have a waiting list.
I was like, wait.
Oh, getting like sample.
No, you said Harris County, so I was like, wait, what?
Yes, we talked to Harris County.
Because they've done
this project.
the maintenance.
Fort Bend County has not done it. So we've talked to Harris County and we've gotten their sample leaseback document. So, you know, if for instance, there's a lot over there close to Barb Mitten's house. So she has come in, and we actually have a waiting list of people who are interested in those lots of doing a lease back for
just a maintenance lease.
Yeah, it's just a maintenance lease, because you can't, because the federal restrictions on it, you can't build on it. You can't, the well and septic have to be capped. You can't put, this fencing is very specific on it, because since it has been deeded unusable and livable property based on NFIP, flood restrictions, you can't go in and put in a chain link fence that can't let flood come through. So we have the sample document from Harris County, and the attorney's already looked at it, and I mean, we literally have had that ready to go for 1.5 years. We're just waiting on the county, and it's I think it was like $100 a year, or was it even that much? I mean, it's super minor. Yeah.
Wouldn't you be able to determine what the amount is though? Because
sure, we can determine in the
income.
It's not. We don't approach it as a revenue generator for the city, because it's more of a, whoever leases it, there's a small amount put on that lease amount, because we want to make sure that they have a vested interest in the property, because the whole intent of the lease back program is for them to maintain the property, so the city is not expensed with having to maintain those properties.
Right.
Yeah, so you have to balance. Like, you don't want to
you have
say
to
it's
kind of
$500
balance
a year,
what that looks like. I mean, if you're charging somebody $500 a year, you know, or a month,
Still don't understand to do what?
to lease.
Oh, you could raise animals, you could do a garden.
Can't put a fence up.
Yeah, you can put a fence up.
I said it's restricted.
Not a chain link.
Restricted, yeah, it's restricted.
You can't be like a privacy or.
It has to be able to allow flow,
Yeah.
because those properties have already flooded, so they don't want something to be put on it that's going to, you know, be in flood's way and have to be mitigated again. That's the whole thing, is that the government has bought those out to be no-use lots. So a lot of people buy them and they put gardens on them, or they, you know, put horses,
Put a
goats,
horse.
whatever.
Big
Yeah.
houses, yeah.
Extra space for the dog to run.
I mean, some cities have, and we talked about this last year in budget cycle, is there is one lot that is centrally located right in Valley Lodge. We have looked at not doing a leaseback program on that, and the city maintaining that lease, and basically employing Keep Simonton Beautiful to maintain that particular lot. They've actually talked at doing kind of a community garden, butterfly garden on it, doing some, there's a lot of grant opportunities through Keep Texas Beautiful and Keep America Beautiful that specify community gardens, butterfly garden, anything that is of a teaching perspective. But we don't have space. I mean, the only property the city owns is what this building is on right here, and it's not a lot. So utilizing one of those lots through Keep Simonton Beautiful for an educational element, put a walking trail, or, you know, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different uses, but because it's centrally located. But almost all of them have a waiting list of people who are interested in leasing this out.
Yeah, we have a pretty good stack.
Yeah.
The good news is, we shouldn't have to budget a big line item for mowing and maintenance on those because folks would like to have them use them. So we had that discussion when this all first started.
There was
What's that gonna cost us before I asked the commissioner to make that agreement with us, so.
There's actually an article, I think it was in Texas Monthly, I had it in my office, about cities that were incurring a lot of these buyback lots and leases and space, and it was when gas was really high, what maintenance programs we're looking at, and cities were actually going and they were buying like these herds of goats and like turning them out. And that's what they were using. They would travel around the city and, you know, like there's these shepherd people that
Navasota just hired a herd of goats.
Navasota does it. Like I mean, it's become pretty popular. It's pretty interesting, but yeah.
I thought you were making a joke.
No, that's serious.
It's for real.
Dead serious. Yeah,
Okay,
and it's a big thing.
My Needville people.
Yeah.
About that.
It's a big. Actually, I think Needville did it. Did Needville do it? I think Needville might have done it. Yeah.
I thought that's what
Goat shaving.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
It's a thing. Okay, well, okay. So I have bylaws on the list. Is there a budget item, or is there information you want for the budget that's related to that, or we're just general? Okay.
I mean, everything's kind of up in the air at the moment. 'Cause if you do ask for something, it's going to be pretty, yeah. The availability of it is kind of, we're just guessing.
I would say, they have made us a promise that's very similar to this every single year, that in 3 months, and 2 months, and 6 months, and we're 4 years later, 5 years later, 6 years later. Hopefully, since they're getting close to the end, it'll be within this budget year, but we don't know. So we just need to be prepared if that's a small amount of mowing while we do transitions, or some of them have trees down, and the county is just not going to remove those. So we'll probably have to take care of those sorts of things before we turn them over. But, you know, we can budget an amount, a minimum amount that would help us manage that if we needed to, if they came through this year. I'll make a note on that though.
Will the amounts in this, will we ever be able to look down and just kind of go through, I hate to say the books because that's not the right word, but like what is
It's in
actually
there.
coming out
That's
of?
the chart of accounts. If you'll flip to the back, the second to last tab, it's in there.
So that, the one that's labeled working budget. So 2023 current, that's what we have right now.
That's the one you told us to look past.
Yeah, so if you go back to that, that's what.
Yeah, page 1 and 2 are just summary pages. Actually, 1, 2, 3. It starts on page 5. 1 through 4 are just summary pages.
Okay.
So that's where we'll be able to go through and talk about every single item. What's in it? Why? What do we use it for? Whatever your questions are, and decide, okay, well, we've already allotted the money, we're going to be out of that technically for the comprehensive plan, so does that money translate over to the road assignment? Or whatever items you guys would like to look at, you know, election costs, probably won't be much change in that. That is not something we control.
It is.
It'll be shared with us what that number will be for next year. It's not something we can affect.
It's a fixed number.
Yeah, it's fixed. So unless you'll have specific items or questions about this, I would love for you to be able to take this with you. It's long, go through it and star or highlight or make a list of the ones that you.
What is your question, Courtney? Is your question?
No.
Oh, I thought you said.
No. I was just looking through it. So, I get that, and I'm not being like OCD, but I'll gladly admit I'm very OCD. On like just for the $245,000 for the consulting, where do we see what we actually resulted in spending? I realize we can't see it on this one because it's not done.
Right,
yet, but-
this isn't the correct report for that. You will see that at the July 11th meeting.
We'll have at the July workshop, how much was budgeted by item, how much we've spent so far. And I don't know that it'll have a projection column because we're working with the functionality of this report. But so then you'll be able to see, we allocated $10,000. So far we spent $8,247 and we have 3 months to go.
But
like on
does it
the
say
comp-
where it was allocated to?
Tell me
So like
more.
on the-
Like Courtney just asked, the consulting, budgeted for $245,000.
Yeah.
How was $200,000 spent for this and 10 was spent to this company and so on and so forth?
Yes, we'll be able to tell you that. Yes.
What's your broad idea?
So, consulting covers a couple of things. It's obviously the consulting for the comprehensive plan, that's our engineering, consulting for revenue management consultant, our social media consultant. There are several things that go into consulting. Year to date on what we've spent on the comprehensive plan, it's $21,000. We've done some change.
No, I'm not worried about that. I was just worried, to her point, more specifically, because
Yeah.
there's numbers thrown around all the time where maybe it didn't end up costing. I know the comprehensive plan is a really good example of that.
Sure.
It says leading up to and not to exceed X amount of dollars. So if it doesn't, where do we actually see what was spent? That was my question.
Actual variance.
Yeah, I want to see what, I know what we budgeted, but what did we actually spend?
Absolutely.
We also, those items may not be necessary, obviously, at that level, but the money needs to be put somewhere else.
Right. That's right.
So will that in and of itself would we also see buckets that are completely empty?
Sure, and there you will see buckets that things have come up in the middle of the year that you will go over. But the way that municipal fund accounting works is that you have the flexibility. A budget is not a hard line. You budgeted $10,000, you went over $10,000, so you're in trouble. That's not how fund accounting works. You'd be surprised how many people don't understand that.
Understood.
So there will be, for instance, I can give you a good one. There has been a lot of cybersecurity and technology security that has been passed down to cities that we are required to do. There are apps that we are required to have if we have city cell phone and technology. They come down and they say, you've got 30 days and you've got to start using this program. You've got 30 days. So last budget cycle, we didn't know to budget for that, and it might only be like a $10.61 charge a month or whatever. But it wasn't something we budgeted for. But there are going to be other things in here, that we, for instance, here's a real life one: election costs. We budgeted $6,700 because last year when we went to our election official and said, we've got an election coming up this year, what is the election going to cost? And they said, we don't foresee any increases, budget the same, $6,700. A month before the election, we get a bill and they have gone up on their prices due to whatever. The county they have to contract people to move the machines, and so there's a lot of moving parts with that. So that's going to be a line item that you're going to see is, $7,100 now, not $67. So the way that it, like Lori said, is you have to understand there's flexibility in a municipal budget.
Sure.
The big thing is that you are in budget. your expenses match your.
Overall.
Right. So yes, to answer your question, you're gonna see some full buckets and you're gonna see some empty buckets that, we thought, hey, this was gonna be an expense, like we thought we were gonna be getting the buyout lots. Things associated, you're not gonna see that, so it will kind of balance out. And I do ask you, each of you, give some grace on that because things do fluctuate throughout the year.
Is there standard variance on items, on what is customary or what's
It really depends. I went through the revenue management school for government, and honestly, the variance was 32%. That was the standard variance. It varies. Do I want to operate on a 32% variance? No, but anybody who's worked, Burns, I'm sure when you've been at the church on finance committee, things happen. Right, we've budgeted in our facility improvement. We know, and we talked about this at the last, we know we've got an aging AC unit. We stay on top of our maintenance, we stay on top of our, summer and winter cooling. We put in the budget every single year that for facility maintenance, we might have to replace that AC unit. But if we don't have to, we're not going to, but it's there, we're responsible in budgeting for it. If something does happen, we're not caught in a pickle and we it's unaccounted for. And I will say, there's some interesting things. I was talking to Lori today. We got notice, both employee insurance and municipal retirement services, they're making changes there. So again, those are not numbers that we just get to arbitrarily pick. Those are given to us by these state organizations, and those are increasing. Healthcare costs are increasing. That's something that we have to, we bear the cost of. They tell us what it is, and we plug that in. They tell us what our municipal rate is, we plug that in.
Yeah, and just in case you thought the government became super efficient, the notification that they sent today has absolutely no detail and makes almost no sense. So, good thing we have until the next workshop to figure out what it means. All right, y'all have other questions about any of the line items, or mainly, if you think of anything after the meeting, call me. Send us an email, whatever. I'd be happy to work on, and we'll collect data for anything you want to have in the budget specifically, so that we'll have enough information to start making decisions. Or
I think I've asked you this before, but I've slept a little since then. Is there a reason that we chose to not utilize the EDC funds from either A or B to take some of the burden off of any of the comp plan? Or the consultant?
I don't know that it was we don't want to use the funds. You have to understand the comp plan is a marathon. This comp plan is only the first 12-month process of what's probably going to be a 2 to 3 year process. So we still have to go through and do zoning, and there's going to be significant fees associated with zoning and what that looks like with engineering and, additional creating the new ordinances to supplement the zoning maps and what that looks like. And I think it was just the conversation that we had, and Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, that we had with council felt like this was a project that they wanted to take on, and they wanted to bear the cost of it as a city, the comprehensive plan, and that we knew that in the future there was going to be a time and a place for EDC to contribute with the other processes that go with the comprehensive plan. It's not like we just finish the comprehensive plan and we wipe our hands and we're done. The comprehensive plan is the start of essentially what the future structure of the city is going to look like, with zoning and some of the other things, subsequent things that come with zoning.
And the city can certainly do it, but we also talked about, everybody sure would like us to get the EDCs reseated, for lack of a better word. Let's get them full again. Let's get them functioning and doing what they're supposed to do.
Isn't it typical that the EDC, at least A, is the
board?
Not typical, it is what we have going now, it's something that's perfectly acceptable to do, but typically Simonton has had separate independent boards for each of those. And you would have members from council on each one as sort of liaison, and then everything that they do is presented back to council for final decisions. But typically, we seat separate boards for
It just doesn't make sense to
that.
me that money's just kind of sitting there, like we haven't utilized our
You're right,
EDCs
and that's
in a
why
long time.
that's why this is the year we're ready to get those people, get those boards reseated and decide, or council might decide to change the structure. But the decision to, let's just go ahead and take care of this plan, especially we just had a great example with that concrete plant of how we needed to get this thing done. Council decided, let's just take care of that, and then let's get the consultant, I keep wanting to call him the president of the EDC. Consultant for that in place, get Joe in place, and then get those boards back up and running. Because they could be creating more revenue stream down the road if we could get some more commercial going, so. That's a good thing.
I know, I don't want to hear that the comprehensive plan is going to take a year, and then it might be 2 or 3 years after that, and I mean, we need to get this done, we need to get zoned.
They sell those properties
I
and
don't-
all of our work is for nothing.
Yeah. So, I don't know how
Oh
to
my God.
speed it up. Is there a way to speed it up? I understand they're contracted for 11 months, but.
Well, you're right, I'm with you. I'm gonna work at a corporate rate and not a government rate of speed, and there's so much other stuff that's involved in it. Being able to speed it up from a 2-year project to a 1-year project, I counted that as a win myself. It's how often the council can meet, how fast they can gather the data and information and get it ready for us. So, and they've agreed, like we talked about, 1 year, that's it. It's not dragging on to be a 16-month or 18-month project. So,
Well, the
got that in the
Jennifer just said it
contract.
might be 2 or 3
Well, because
years after
comprehensive
that.
plan is just comprehensive plan, and then you go into zoning and ordinances, so that's,
And then
it doesn't necessarily have to drag out that long, and it is based on council and the availability of people to attend the meetings and do the work.
Yeah. So, once that's completed and filed with the state, we're ready to go. It's just a matter of how fast you guys want to work.
How are
I
we
like
holding,
fast.
how are we holding, I agree, I like fast too, get it over with and move. But how are we holding them accountable
We meet
to
with
that
them
So
timeline?
they have monthly,
We meet with them weekly. We have weekly meetings with them, and we have a whole accountability schedule, everything broken into chapters, what's been accomplished, what they're working on. They check in with Erica, they check in with us. Last week, we got everything completed with the website, all of that loaded on, and we've got a whole schedule. It's not like we're just cutting them loose and saying.
Yeah,
No, I'm just, yeah, for my own curiosity, I would love to see that information as well.
It's on the
because it surely makes it a
website.
lot more
It's-
palatable.
So
It's on the website, and
There's
then they give us monthly updates that will be provided at council.
And there's a
their website?
projected,
On
no, on our
our
website, there's a tab now that says comp plan on the top.
Okay.
And then there's a proposed work schedule that's under that information, that'll show you what their proposed work schedule is.
and then, I know we were kind of several talking at once, but that'll be provided in a monthly update to council too.
Well, and the
So-
reason I'm asking, just to be crystal clear, is that you've got a line item in here of consulting for $245,000. We need to be able to decide in a very short amount of time if that amount of money is gonna need to be there for continued consulting if the plan is not done in 12 months.
It will, everything is on, that's what I explained at the last council meeting, is that everything is broken into what they call chapters, and we progress pay on the completion of a chapter. So May and June, the total amount was, June was 21,000, May was, for estimating purposes, let's say 5,000. So we're roughly,
26.
yeah,
so
whatever. So what we'll do is when we get to August and we've got those numbers and we're trying to fine tune numbers. When you do municipal budgets, you're not going in and you're not budgeting $559 because you have estimated you do put a leverage in there. You usually put about a 10% leverage in there for incidentals in that line item. Not much, but enough that if something happens. So, we will be able to deduct out from that 175, 74,000 with the final contract, what we've paid up to that point and what we're gonna have to pay into the next year, and we will adjust that line item. So we're not gonna have consulting as 245 as next year. We're gonna take the contract price, we're going to back out what we have spent up into August, and then calculate the months out that are still left. But we have it, I mean, we have the whole spreadsheet of what the estimated chapter prices are. So we can look at that and we can know that obviously that amount is going to be crossed over between 2 budget years. I mean, it's 1 year completion, but it's crossed over between 2 budget years.
So all of the money was not used in this budget year?
Well, correct, because it wasn't approved until May.
Okay.
I mean, if council feels comfortable saying, let's pay out the full 174,000 by the end of September.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that
you
we've
can do
collected that. We've collected that as part of the tax hike.
We haven't collected all of it yet, though.
Well, we will have by the end of the fiscal year or whatnot. So what we're doing
by the end of
is
the calendar year, it'll come in.
calendar year.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the end of that calendar year, though, that money is already kind of earmarked, for lack of better terms, for the entire project. That's what we were told.
Right.
That's what everybody was told.
Right.
So if we have to back out from the original 245 number that's in here, what we haven't spent yet,
So
what happens to
again,
245,000?
245,000 is not all for the comprehensive plan.
Right.
So
But the majority of it is.
200,000 of that 245, right.
Right.
But again, this goes back to where I was saying, you have to extend grace when it comes to governmental budgets, because timelines don't necessarily match up with budget years. So we had to go out for RFP. We had to open.
I understand that. What I'm getting at is you put this money in this bucket
Sure.
for this plan.
Mhm.
We're gonna collect that money. Time is irrelevant at this point. I mean, obviously, we will collect it at some point. How do where does it go? Where's it go?
So
It's not like the money just vanishes. I mean, if the money isn't used during this.
well, let me just say, so at the next meeting when we're talking about, we'll see budget versus actual, like what's been taken out of that consultant so far.
Okay.
And so I think what she's saying is,
You'll see it.
you'll see it, what the actual is in there, and then you'll know how much is coming out. That money's still there. It's basically rolling into the next thing, but you will be able to budget based on next year.
So
the money has been
this much money will be left, and then the new budget number, less than
Or the remainder of the
245.
contract,
Right.
correct?
This money is left to pay the balance of the contract, and then what you need for the following year.
But it's not like just because we collected this money, the money just kind of arbitrarily disappears. So if the money comes into our bank account, again, go back to fund accounting, if the money comes in, and again, we have a daily sweep of 25,000. Let's say we get a deposit from Fort Bend County, our ad valorem deposit for, I mean, in some months we might get 40,000. We get a $40,000 deposit, doesn't sit in our operating account, it's swept over to an ICS fund with a high yield rate where it sits there and accrues money. So that money is still there in our bank account. And basically, all we're using, every time we pay that, we can still move it back to pay that comprehensive plan. And if we accrued that money, through our tax revenue income, it's still there, it doesn't go away. It's just, again, you have to think about those buckets. It's kind of moved around. Like, that's how government accounting works. There's
Right.
constant shifting and moving because government budgets don't line up with calendar years. They don't line up with the county tax department. None of that stuff lines up together. So that's why I say you have to give some grace in the way that contracts are administered, when the payouts, I mean, sometimes we have contracts and we're not billed for the contract until 13 or 14 months later. Even if we started that on October 1, we're still paying it out in a different budget year because that's the way that the contract rolls.
I get that, but what I'm getting at is we've got the money for the plan that we anticipated having this year. So we've got enough to pay him. Like, here's your, I know we wouldn't do this, but like, here's your 200 and whatever $1,000.
That's what I said. I mean, council, you guys have privy, if you want to.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. We have the ability to do that as of right now. So when we do go into budgeting, we don't have to anticipate that again. So we wouldn't have to really back out what we've already paid,
Well,
right? When we're anticipating budget.
It's called a year to actual, so you would want to see the year to actual of what we've paid Ardura, but
Correct.
but it's not fair to say that the money's not there because the money is there.
Well, she's saying,
That's what I'm saying. I agree
I think
wholeheartedly.
what it all boils down to is that consultant fee or what has been allocated for this year, is it still gonna be 245?
No, and I've said that
that's what I'm
100
saying.
times.
That's
So
what I'm
I think that's
asking.
what she's
That's
saying.
exactly what I'm asking, yeah.
So as of right now, we're taking out the $200,000 for Adura and it'll be 45,000.
Right,
If it runs
exactly.
over.
That's my point.
Right, and that's what I said, I mean, and I'll
said it a
even say,
different way.
I'll go back
Yeah.
a year, we said that a year ago. This is a 1-year allocation of 200,000 for the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
The council has the privy of like, to Lori's, to Lori's point, take that 200,000, keep the budget balanced, how it is, take that 200,000 and move it down to facilities and do road repair. $200,000 in road repair, or what?
I said, we're done.
Right, yeah, I mean, we're done. I mean, but that's how you have to maneuver, I mean, that's how you maneuver city budgets.
Got it.
Managing cash flow. As it comes in.
Okay. Anybody thought of something while you're sitting here that you want to add as a priority item or a wish list item for us to research?
We are putting on the next agenda the monthly bill approval. Are we putting that back on the agenda as a new item?
For, you're talking about regular council meeting, not the
Yes,
budget?
regular council meetings, yeah, not this week.
The item that Faith, that was she's talking about.
Yes, because I'll help with a lot of this. See what's actually going out and in, and Nicole will help.
Well, and at the budget meeting, you'll see
We'll see.
the more global.
Sure.
Why is that being added
Versus-
to the agenda? I'm sorry.
It was hello, okay, try that again. It was previously done, a long time ago, and it's just just to keep everything kind of clear as far as what we're paying monthly, gives me a better idea of how this government funding is kind of working. I know
It's a
that
recap
may
of
not be
Bill's
the reason
wage
she
each
asked,
month?
but
Like electricity? Is that what you, okay.
yeah, it's just a monthly bill approval or whatnot. It's supposed to technically be done by the government code or whatever, so.
And could I ask, I know it's not on the wish list, but did we get the 2 other estimates for the roof so we can get started on it?
Yes, we
That
did.
is in process. I saw it.
They came in today.
And so when do we approve those?
We've already pre-approved up to X dollars, and if it's more than that, we'll bring it back to council. If it's less than that, we'll tell you when the roofs get replaced.
So we can get it done? We can get it
No,
done
they were
right away?
significantly higher. The other two were significantly higher.
Correct.
I will say, I think you asked the question about the insulation. The way that this building was constructed, none of the companies really felt like replacing the entire insulation was a smart move unless it adds anywhere from $10,000 to $17,000 to the bid price. They did say that they would look at the specific area where they can see if there are specific, they call them hotspots, and that they would patch those. I mean, at no additional expense, but they didn't feel like the whole building needed to be done. All of the insulation needed to be done. In fact, while y'all are here, I can. Okay, so Ameristar is the one that y'all had approved up to 17,810. KB Investment Properties was 24,786. Renovations Unlimited was 24,768. If you wanted the insulation done, Ameristar was 26,910. KB Investments was 33,341. And Renovations Unlimited was 34,768.
And those were all exactly the same bid.
Yes.
If basically it's water damage, we don't have insurance on this building? Just curious.
We do have insurance, but it's not, last time we checked, it didn't qualify as water damage.
Pretty sure that geyser you had coming through the roof in your office is qualifying as water damage.
I mean, literally, when I say like, it was coming, I mean, Lori, I texted Lori, I was on a conference call when it happened. I texted her, sent her a video, she comes up, literally has to bring the fans up, is trying to rip my carpet up. Luckily, this carpet doesn't have any padding underneath it, so we were able to dry it out and it not affect the, Justin came, that just happened to swing by. He saw it that afternoon, it was coming in the wall, dripping down, like, I mean, literally, it almost covered my entire office.
Can we, just out of curiosity, would you double check that again? I had the same issue at my home, and it's also a metal roof, and it's a little drip, right? And I was like, oh crap, it was when we got like the 4 inches of rain. Honestly, I thought
Because
my
they're
dogs
saying the.
had an accident, I was like, ooh, I'm gonna kiss somebody.
Just
But I
found-
called my insurance company, which is Katie Roofing, or I called my insurance company, because I know I have a clause as far as cosmetic damage, and that was when we got that hail. But I called my Katie Roofing guy, and he was like, nope, came out with the inspector and everything, and they did it for my deductible.
Yeah, I'll ask him, I mean, I called
Because
him
of the
once
water
before.
damage.
Justin found the actual issue with why a lot of it, a bulk of it was coming in. It doesn't avert the roof issue, but one of the issues is why it was coming in, he found. Yeah, it was coming in.
Because they won't do it if it's poor construction, your insurance company.
Well, yeah,
They're gonna fix
that's
that
true.
on the same day.
That's true, but the water damage part of it is, I can't imagine that they would tell you not to, I mean, look at the mold.
Yeah.
You can see the mold yourself.
Well, and I will say, Courtney, some of that is not, that's from an AC unit. Because if you go into the garage, the way that this building was built, there is an exposed, what's it called, eave? So we've got our AC units up here, and it's circulating, but it's pulling in the hot air from the fire station, and it's pulling in because it was never closed off. So like today, we had buckets in the office because it was so humid, it's just drip, like dripping and dropping.
Water damage though.
We had a fan.
And honestly, a lot of these, we had somebody come and check them, they're not active.
Yeah,
We just have to, I mean, we've just got to replace the
One tile.
ceiling tiles,
That was
yeah.
pretty bad.
Okay, folks, I think we've talked about the agenda, the budget workshop. Our next meeting is on the 11th, if I recall correctly. We'll see y'all here. I hope everybody has a great Independence Day.
It's a regular council meeting, right?
Regular council meeting.
On your
On the
calendar, it says,
Or it might be
time,
called
it says
special.
all day. If you look it up, and someone asked me about that, and I said, I don't know.
Oh, on the website calendar?
Yeah, it says, the time, it says all day. I thought,
Well, I miss y'all.
Might not be a lot of
We're gonna be here all day.
okay, just.
Yeah, usual
check
time,
it.
6:30.
Okay.
We're gonna adjourn, and it's 8:20.